right, back with Anthony Ramirez of Abogado Mas Chingon. Of course, my favorite attorney in town and running for state senate and looking dapper as always. I'm
Thank
like
you.
all casual, like ready for the beach, and you're like spiffy and
It's my uniform.
I love
Look
it.
at it.
I'm like, wow, Mr. Politician. My
Thank
dad
you.
asked if you're running for president.
That's right.
I think you should.
Well, let's just get past the Senate first. We got to get into
Okay,
that.
and then I
office.
can say I knew him when.
Right.
Okay, we have some interesting topics to talk about, and I just want to preface, I never really like talking about politics, but I have to say talking about it with you is really refreshing and interesting.
Mhm.
Why can't we just have just a really diplomatic conversation about the topics that are happening right now?
Right. 100%. And what's really interesting was the Supreme Court had some really interesting rulings that came out today on their last day of this session, and they're getting politicized, and it's not supposed to, right? That would be a really interesting subject to talk about,
Yeah.
being that I'm now also a politician in addition to being an attorney, when really what we should be doing is removing politics out of everything that you've seen come down today.
Can we please do that?
Right?
Yeah.
You would hope so. So essentially, you know what happened? We had two rulings come down today, the two big ones. We had the birthright citizenship issue, had the women and men's sports issue. That came up, right?
I know that's a big one.
Yeah,
Big
and
controversial.
there are people on both sides that are upset, right?
Right.
About they're either going to be really excited or they're going to be really upset. And in this environment that we're in, when the Supreme Court gets a decision that they think is right, they like the decision that they made.
They're the best.
They're the best. And when they rule against them, there's a lot of problems. They're the worst, right?
Right.
There's a problem with the system. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. In fact, if you see what happened today, the Supreme Court is working exactly the way it should be, right?
So that made you feel good, right?
The separation of powers, right, it's vital for our constitutional system of government to work, right?
Yeah.
Separation of powers, you have the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative, right? So Congress writes the laws, the executive, the president, enforces them, and the judiciary, the Supreme Court, evaluates law, right? They make
Yeah.
the decisions as to whether or not it's
Valid,
fair.
yeah.
It's valid. So the way that it's working, in my view, is perfect. So if we take a look at, this administration, so Donald Trump has appointed 3 justices, right? Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh,
Okay.
Brett Kavanaugh. And all 3 of those justices are, people think, well, Trump appointed them, so
It's not
they
going to
should
be
be
fair.
loyal to the Trump administration. They should be doing, coming out on Trump's, in his favor. But presidents don't appoint them to have a loyal member of their administration. They're appointing these people to give a impartial view of the Constitution as they see it, right?
Okay.
This is their job. They're supposed to be independent. So today's rulings, Trump got one in favor, the women and men and women's sports issue. That was a
Yeah.
win for them. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And the birthright citizenship, which was a loss, right? So there are justices that came out against the birthright citizenship, and that shows you that the system is working the way it's supposed to, because some of these judges were Trump appointees, right?
Right. So Trump won in one instance and didn't win in another instance.
Correct. And so in the birthright citizenship, everybody's taking a look at it as, whether or not this is a constitutional issue. Really, the decision that was made today was whether or not the President of the United States has the constitutional authority to change the Constitution or to interpret the Constitution, i.e. the 14th Amendment, by executive order, right?
And they said
And
no.
so the Supreme Court rejected that. They said he can't. So really, if the country wants to address this issue of birthright citizenship, they have to go and do it through the constitutional process.
Wow.
Right? And that's really what was decided today. But again, if you look at the political environment that we're in, well, pick a side,
Yeah.
right? They're going to say they either got it right or they got it really, really wrong.
Well, I think you brought up some really good points earlier before we came on about why that's, because off the top of my head, I'm like, if they're born in the U.S., they should be a citizen. But you brought up some really good points where, is that the case that
Sure.
I hadn't thought of? So
Sure.
all of these situations go much deeper than the surface level. You throw it out there, and it's very easy to make a quick decision on something
Sure.
without knowing all the facts.
Exactly. And so Clarence Thomas, again, pick a side. Some people like him, some don't. But he had a very, very good dissent. that he wrote. And, he talked about that, you have to look back at the time when the 14th Amendment was drafted. This was at the time of slavery, and it was really to address Dred Scott, right? And it was, written back then and interpreted by a lot of scholars to say this is addressing the children of slaves, right? And however, the way they decided today was said, no, if you were born in the United States and you're subject to the jurisdiction thereof, then you're a U.S. citizen. It's been decided, and that's how they decided it today. So again, whether or not you agree with the decision or not, right, doesn't mean that the Supreme Court isn't working the way that it should, right? It's supposed to be independent. It's supposed to look at these issues and remove the politics out of it. We have become very team sport oriented in the United States, and frankly, that's the reason why I'm running as an independent for senator.
Yeah, I love that, because you are going to take every single issue independent of being conservative or being liberal.
Sure. Look, if the Republicans get it right, I'm going to support it. The Democrats get it right, I'm going to support that. If either one of them, in our case, isn't doing what's right for Arizona, then I'm going to reject it. And so that's where we're at.
I love that. Okay, let's look at the second topic, because I think this one's a really spicy one.
It is.
And I maybe just want to say my thought really quickly about it as an exercise physiologist. Men are born from birth 30% stronger than women, period. Off the cuff, before they lift a weight, have anything else, they're 30% stronger. So in my mind, I think, well, how could I ever compete with a man?
Correct. And I think biology would tell you that, when it comes to strength and agility, things like that a lot of women can't. Now, I'm sure there's some women out there that'll kick guys' butts, right? So that's beside the point.
Right. Yeah, right.
Right. But, at the end of the day, what they decided today was that the individual states have the power to make these decisions, right? So there was a West Virginia case and an Idaho case that were contesting, whether or not a biological male could be competing against women in sports in their state. And they said no. They came out with a state law that said they couldn't. So really what the court did today was decide or say that states have the ability to make these decisions for themselves.
But what happens when it comes to a national level?
So at that point in time, that would be a constitutional issue. We're not there yet. I think that someday we will get to that point. We're just not there yet. But that is, if you look at a good one on that one was Roe v. Wade. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was a decision that gave a federally protected right for abortion, right? Yeah. And recently, the last several years, they came back and they overturned it and said, no, this is a decision that the states can address because it's not addressed in the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you have a right to that. And so it's for each individual state. Now look, again, pick a side. These are topics that are hot for people. Yeah. And in this particular case, I have a 15-year-old daughter. She's an athlete. In fact, she's sixth in the nation in figure skating in 2024. And I don't want her competing against males, right? She has and has earned the right to excel. Recognition and excel against other females.
Well, right? If you want to talk about, I'm not an ice skater, but if you want to talk about them doing those big, twists and turns up in the air, mm-hmm. the strength in a man's legs they're going to be able to get higher. They're going to be able to twist longer. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, it is what it is. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not in medicine, so I don't know a lot about that. But I do know it's common sense. Okay, so I agree with today's decision. I support it. There are people that would disagree with me, and that's fine. But that's what makes our country so great. We should be able to disagree
and still get along. Can we all be friends?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think today, when I was watching the news about these stories, to me it really jumped out to me because there were, even the president came and said when it came to the birthright citizenship, we got it wrong. Our country's going to, really disappointed in the Supreme Court. At the end of the day, the fact that the justices that he appointed did not come out in his favor does not mean that the court is not working. In fact, the evidence is overwhelming that the Supreme Court is acting in exactly the way that it should be.
And that should make you feel good.
Right.
That should make all of you feel good. That,
yeah.
All right, the president might not be the president you would have picked, but this is why we have all these other things built in.
Right. It's the separation of powers, and it needs to work that way, right? It absolutely is working the way that it should. And I thought it was really, really interesting today, how everything came out. Again, whether or not you agree with it is beside the point. Just because you don't agree with it does not mean that it's not working. And so, an interesting today in the court.
I love that.
Yeah.
okay, Anthony, you are awesome. You are such an asset to the state of Arizona. And by the way, if you need an attorney, I'm constantly texting you. I'm like, Anthony, I don't know, or calling. I don't know if you can help my friend, but right? I mean, you're my first point of contact at this point.
Yeah, and I love it. Call me anytime. And any of you can call me anytime as well. I am running for state senator in Legislative District 12, which is essentially Ahwatukee, West Chandler, and South Tempe. My website is ramirezforaz.com, and there is a link to donate there. So even though you can't vote for me, you can still elect me or help me get elected into office by making a donation. And I'll tell you, we're very excited. In my district, there is no Republican candidate. So it's myself, an independent, running against a Democrat. It is an open seat. She's not an incumbent. So Mitzi Epstein, the current senator, is retiring. She's term limited out, so she's not running. And so we're competing for the seat. I will tell you, there's a true path. A lot of people say independents are spoilers or they're there to split the vote. And in this particular case, we actually have a true path. And I'll tell you, Albert Einstein said the definition of insanity is
doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
That's correct. We've been doing that for the last 114 years in Arizona. And so this will be the first time when I get elected in Arizona history that a politician will be reporting and answering to the people instead of a political party.
I love that. That just gave me chills.
Thank you.
I think we're ready for a change. You're awesome. First time ever that I've even tried talking about politics at all. It's not my wheelhouse, but I think your message is incredible.
Thank you.
You've been in Arizona forever.
Yeah, since 1991.
That's forever.
Mm-hmm. Left for a little while, but I came back.
And you're just doing good things.
Yeah.
Good things. And I think you see the world right.
Yeah, thank you. Our state deserves politicians that want to solve problems instead of point fingers. And
not only that, but let's just point out, you were a cop, you've had all these different careers.
Today I'm a licensed insurance adjuster in Arizona
There you
and
go.
Texas, an Arizona private investigator, and an Arizona and New Mexico attorney.
You've seen everything.
I've seen a lot, and some things I didn't want to see, right? But I've seen a lot, and it's given me a lot of life experience to be able to borrow from, to think of problems. And you know what's funny? I was telling somebody this just yesterday. When I was a cop, they asked me, what did you do to prepare yourself to be a police officer? And a lot of guys go, well, I went to firearms training and defensive driving classes and defensive tactics training and blah,
You're
blah,
like,
blah,
I was
blah.
on the street.
You know what I told them?
No.
I said, I was a flight attendant for 10 years with Southwest Airlines. That's a good, and here's why. I had to get from point A to point B with 137 people in a locked, tube at 37,000 feet. Some were drunk, some were sick, some were sad from a death in the family, happy, it just ran the gamut.
Yeah, everybody.
And we had to get everybody there safely, and we had to make them want to come back. And so learning how to talk to people and deal with people in different situations was the best training that I've ever had.
Mm.
And look, it's the best training that I had to be a lawyer. And I honestly believe that it's the best training to be a politician. And I don't know how long we have, but I'll tell you a story. So, I skydive.
Yep.
So a good friend of mine is a fellow skydiver. His name's Brian O'Connor. Okay. And a few months ago, about a year ago, he had a skydiving helmet on. He had a badge on the back of his helmet. It was a U.S. Marshal's badge, right? And, being an ex-police officer, police officers will say, whenever you see somebody wearing some sort of insignia, you're always wanting to know.
You're part of a fraternity.
Right?
Yeah.
So I asked him, I said, hey, were you a U.S. Marshal? And he said, no, they protected my mother. And I was like, oh, was your mother in witness protection? Right? I was joking. He thought it was funny. But anyway, so he said, no, my mother was Sandra Day O'Connor.
I knew you were going to say that.
That's it. And so, interestingly, about a month ago in this process, about 2 months ago, I was in a meeting with, it was an organization of women voters, right? And I was there telling them about my candidacy. And one of the ladies brought up the fact, because I'm an independent, I'm telling my independent story, and that I don't want to answer to political parties. I want to do what's best for Arizona.
Yeah.
So she said, let me tell you a story. And she said, after Sandra Day O'Connor had retired from the United States Supreme Court, she was back home. She was in a group of Arizona women, touring the Senate. And someone asked Sandra Day O'Connor, okay, we're here in the Senate building. What is different today than what it was like when you were in the Senate?
Yeah.
What's the difference? And her response was, well, you see all those donkeys and elephants down there? And she said, well, yeah. And she goes, well, back when I was in the Senate, it was just a bunch of Arizonans that would gather here to solve problems for the state. And I'll tell you, that really hit me hard.
It gives me chills.
So a week ago, I was at Skydive Arizona in Eloy, greatest place to skydive on planet Earth. I'll give them a plug.
Of course, he was going to give them a plug, yeah.
And we were done jumping, and Brian and I saw him in the bar. So I went to go have a beer with him, and I told him, hey, you know what, I was talking about your mom the other day, and I told him what I just told you guys. And he said, oh, that's not even the half of it. He said, you know, she was the president of the Senate, the majority leader. And she was actually, you know, she wasn't only the first female Supreme Court justice, she was the first majority leader in any state Senate in the United States.
Wow.
What an amazing woman, right?
Badass.
So anyway, he says, no, the way she became president of the Senate was that, you know, they lived in Paradise Valley, a wealthy family, Arizona family.
Of course.
And she goes, man, my mom used to throw parties in the backyard, and she would invite all the Democrats and all the Republicans, and they would come to my house, and there'd be mariachis and Mexican food. It was like a core memory as a kid of her bringing all these people together so that they would see each other as human beings, right?
Yeah, what
and
happened
not just adversaries. And she also told me that when she became a Supreme Court justice, right, there was a tradition there that the justices would communicate by sending messages back and forth via their clerks, right? Just pieces of paper or whatever. And that she started the tradition of the justices meeting every week for lunch and round tabling and discussing the cases and getting to know one another. And that tradition still exists today, from what I understand. So it all goes back to her. So last night, I was doing a speech, a symposium for independence, and somebody asked me, what is my hope for, you know, for my term as a Senate when I get elected, or as a senator when I get elected? And I told them I want to have a bunch of parties in my backyard and invite people and come over and bring everybody back together, because the way the system today is broken, and we need to fix it. We have a lot of serious problems ahead of us, and it's going to take some serious people, and we have to do it together. We can't be pointing fingers and blaming one another. We have to come together.
I agree. Well,
that's it.
Did I say it? I'll say it one more time. You're awesome. He's awesome.
Thank you.
All right, you guys, and that is all. Stay tuned for more.